We bring you breaking updates from across the world. First up, United Nations Secretary-General António Guterres has again emphasized the need for a permanent ceasefire, improved humanitarian aid and political process leading to a true peace in Gaza based on a two-state solution. He's also stated that the United States has been instrumental in removing obstacles to the delivery of aid in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, Guterres has also noted that there were strong reasons to believe war crimes had been committed in the war between Israel and Hamas. In recent months, a US-backed peace plan, which was endorsed by the UN Security Council, that included provisions for a temporary ceasefire and international force for Gaza, was in fact accepted. Guterres has urged all parties to commit to the implementation of all elements of the agreement, seeing it as an opportunity for progress. Take a look at what the UN Secretary-General had to say.
We need to make sure that we have a ceasefire that holds, that humanitarian distribution goes on improving, and it is improving at the present moment, and at the same time that we pave the way for a true peace in the Middle East.
In other developments, UN Secretary-General António Guterres has condemned recent US military strikes in Venezuela, asserting that such actions violate international law. Guterres has emphasized that the principles of international law are incompatible with the kind of military action taken by the US in the Caribbean. His statement follows growing international concern over escalating tensions between Washington and Caracas. The UN's criticism highlights the global calls for restraint and adherence to diplomatic solutions in addressing geopolitical conflicts. Up until now, the US administration, the Pentagon in particular, under Pete Hegseth, has been asserting that all its strikes in the Caribbean are in accordance with not just US law, but also international law. We'll leave this at that. In other news, we're now learning that US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has stated that he is confident on the Supreme Court's tariff decision in the United States of America, and has emphasized that the US Supreme Court needs to be prudent about ongoing Trump's IEEPA tariffs. US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has, of course, emphasized and made these statements. He has, in fact, expressed his optimism about the upcoming decision. There are several key economic issues that are currently underway in the United States of America, and he's confident that the US Supreme Court will act prudently in its upcoming decision on the tariffs that were imposed by Donald Trump. Remember, the Trump administration had first imposed tariffs on the 2nd of April under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Bessent has stated that those IEEPA tariffs have given the United States a significant bargaining power and leverage as far as trade deals are concerned. He's also noted that fentanyl-related tariffs have pushed China to make what the US has described as robust efforts to curb fentanyl supply. He's added that if the US Supreme Court were to strike down the IEEPA tariffs that were imposed by the Trump administration, the administration could recreate the same tariff structures using other means as well. It's the latest that we are tracking on the broadcast as far as this is concerned. Shifting focus to more developments that we are tracking on the broadcast at the moment. In other news, we're tracking as far as the Russia-Ukraine war is concerned. Our fourth story of the day is, of course, shifting focus to the developments as far as the 5-hour meeting and the aftermath of this meeting between Steve Witkoff and Russian President Vladimir Putin is concerned. It does seem that despite the lengthy meeting in Moscow yesterday, the Kremlin and Washington, they're not seeing eye to eye on crucial issues. The most persistent of these issues is the territorial concessions that was included in the original 28-point draft that was leaked by the Associated Press that had called for a lot of concessions from Ukraine. Russia is, of course, looking at staking claim on the Donbas region and getting that claim recognized by all international parties as well. In light of all of that, another key sticking point that has cropped up is the fact that Ukraine's European allies have been calling for NATO-style security guarantees, which are articulated under Article 5 of the NATO Charter, to also be guaranteed to Ukraine. This is all coming as the peace negotiations are underway, but on the same line, we're seeing kinetic action continuing as far as the war is concerned. Russia is launching drones as high as 500, and Ukraine, of course, hitting back through drone warfare as well. The situation on the front lines continues to escalate as we speak. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has stated that these discussions that have taken place are productive, and while no concrete or move or peace deal has come through as far as these negotiations are concerned, we have learned that up until now, Kremlin has viewed it as a first step towards a longer path to peace. Joining me on the broadcast is my colleague Marisha Barve. Marisha, over to you. What are the key takeaways from the 5-hour-long conversation and the aftermath?
Well, yes, Pia. Something I'd like for you and our viewers to take a note of is how ironic the situation currently in Russia and Ukraine is. Here we're talking about a 5-hour meet or summit that took place with Russia and US envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner with regards to the peace plan. But on the other hand, ironically, there are also escalation of violence in the territorial regions between Russia and Ukraine. Now, like you very rightly mentioned, even though they have not reached a breakthrough with regards to Russia, Russia and the Kremlin especially has said that the talks were rather constructive and productive. A few key issues that are at stake with regards to the peace plan, which has been an issue in terms of reaching, are territorial and security guarantees. Now, Ukraine is not willing to cede any controlled regions, while Russia demands Ukraine relinquish eastern territories of Donetsk and a few other regions that they have taken control of. And let's talk about security guarantees. Ukraine insists on clear security guarantees, and which includes a potential membership with the NATO, which Russia strongly disagrees with. Now, Putin's position in all of this is that Putin rejected any changes proposed by Kyiv and the European allies with regards to the peace plan. Putin has warned that Russia is prepared to fight Europe if they want war. Now, these are strong statements coming in from Russia. While on the other hand, let's talk about Ukraine's response. Well, President Zelensky has expressed that peace talks should result in a lasting agreement, by which he does mean that Ukraine's right to participate in the peace process is necessary, and he insists that not only support from the European countries, but a global support to come to Ukraine in the midst of all of this to fight to fight Russia. He has suggested to increase sanctions. So these are a few key takeaways that that I can give you for you and the viewers on the broadcast.
Absolutely, Marisha. You've, of course, highlighted what Zelensky has put forward as well. At the same breath, we're seeing the United States leadership, whether it's Donald Trump or Marco Rubio, they have stated that the onus lies upon Europe at large to fund its own security. In response to this, we have seen NATO Chief Mark Rutte also highlighting the importance of maintaining Ukraine's military strength while negotiations still unfold. Requesting you to stay on with us, Marisha. We're tracking further developments. We're now learning that the Kremlin is signaling cautious optimism over ongoing contacts with the US regarding the peace talks in Moscow that are taking place. Senior Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov has stated that recent developments on the battlefield have had a quote-unquote positive effect on the current negotiating track, and that conversations with representatives of US President Donald Trump have been very positive as well. Remember, the meeting had taken place in Moscow, 5-hour-long conversation between Vladimir Putin, Steve Witkoff, as well as Jared Kushner, who is not just Donald Trump's son-in-law, but also his close advisor. Now, Ushakov has emphasized that Washington has confirmed its willingness to consider Russia's key proposals, including concerns raised during discussions about a possible Ukrainian membership in NATO, although he declined to give any further details on that particular topic as well. Remember, this has been a key sticking point, one of the core issues that Russia has drawn a red line on. Ushakov has noted that Russia currently has no contact with European countries regarding the issue of frozen Russian assets, but has stressed that Moscow remains open to any such dialogue that can take place. Russia does maintain that any use of frozen assets by the Europeans is tantamount to stealing its money. In other news, German Foreign Minister Johann Vadeful has stated that Germany takes Belgium's concerns over the use of Russian frozen assets very, very seriously, and that it should be possible to find a solution to those concerns if all allies stand together. Belgium have, of course, earlier penned a letter to the European Commission noting down its concerns as far as the use of these funds are concerned, because if taken away within Belgium's sovereign territory as well, the onus lies squarely on Belgium. This, of course, comes as Belgian Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost has stated that Belgium's concerns on the use of the assets to fund Ukraine have not been addressed by the European Commission's proposals. Listen in to what was stated.
The letter of my Prime Minister outlined again clearly our concerns. In short, the necessary guarantees for Euroclear, full mutualization of the risks, and go beyond Euroclear and Belgium. These are legitimate and reasonable concerns. Our door has always remained open and still is. However, we have the frustrating feeling of not having been heard. Our concerns are being downplayed. The text the Commission will table today do not address our concerns in a satisfactory manner.
Die Regierung arbeitet darauf hin, dass wir im Europäischen Rat einen entsprechenden Beschluss fassen können, dass wir die eingefrorenen russischen Vermögenswerte nutzbar machen können. Das muss auf einer sicheren Rechtsgrundlage geschehen. Daran arbeitet die Kommission und wird die Vorschläge jetzt präsentieren. Wir unterstützen das und wir nehmen die belgischen Sorgen selbstverständlich ernst. Sie sind berechtigt, aber das Thema ist lösbar. Dann lösbar, wenn wir gemeinsam bereitstehen, Verantwortung zu übernehmen. Deutschland ist dazu bereit und ermutigt alle Mitgliedstaaten, das ebenso zu tun. Ich bin sehr zuversichtlich, dass am Ende der Vorschlag des Bundeskanzlers sich durchsetzen wird.
In further developments, we're now learning that Ukraine has launched another attack on Russia's Druzhba oil pipeline, this time in the central Tambov region. This is according to a source in Ukraine's GRU military intelligence. This marks the 5th Ukrainian strike on the pipeline, which supplies Russian oil to Hungary and Slovakia. This particular attack was carried out using remote-controlled explosives. It did not disrupt oil supplies, as Slovak and Hungarian operators have confirmed that flows through Druzhba remain normal. There was no immediate comment from Russia as well as far as this particular matter is concerned. Meanwhile, Ukraine strikes on this particular pipeline are taking place even as negotiations are happening on the side. This is, of course, a part of a broader strategy in order to target Russia's energy infrastructure. Kyiv has stated that these attacks are in retaliation for Russia's ongoing assaults on Ukraine's power grid. It aims to weaken Moscow's war efforts. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus away from the war in Europe towards more news that we're tracking this time from the United States of America. We're learning that the U.S. has paused all immigration applications, including green cards and U.S. citizenship processing, filed by immigrants from 19 non-European countries. What we're learning now is that the Trump administration has cited concerns over national security and public safety in order to justify this particular decision. The pause applies to people from 19 countries that were already subjected to partial travel ban back in June, placing further restrictions on immigration. We do know that Donald Trump has adopted a hardline stance against immigration. That was in fact one of his key talking points over which his MAGA voter base had voted him to power. Meanwhile, a lot of rhetoric over Somalis in the United States of America is exploding. Donald Trump, of course, had passed some rather derogatory, crude remarks. Meanwhile, Somalis are expressing a widespread anger after Donald Trump had in fact made a series of such remarks claiming that Somalis back in their home countries have it out for each other. They're quote-unquote trying to kill each other as well. This has drawn sharp condemnation across Mogadishu. We've seen a statement by the Prime Minister of Somalia earlier as well. Meanwhile, local residents have called this language that has been used by the US president as crude and unacceptable, with some in fact urging the international community and Americans themselves to respond. Listen in.
hadalkiisa xataa dadka ma fahamsana wuxuu ku hadlaay marka Soomaaliya anaga Soomaali
xina Donald Trump ee Mareykanka uu qaldiyay inuu dhaho Soomaali waa qashin qubbe Mareykanka ayaa qashin qubbe oo homleysay oo waddanka jiifan dadka Mareykanka jooga Soomaalida oo dad shaqeystaan oo gub oo fiican markuu ku qaldiyay inuu dhaho Soomaalida way qaldiyeen inay dhaho uu ku qaldiyay.
With us on the broadcast is my colleague Maresha Barve. Maresha, we've seen these statements from Donald Trump. It's ignited quite a storm. We do know that a majority of the Somali community is quite strong, particularly in Minnesota. What's also interesting is that the Trump administration's immigration crackdown is also being focused towards Minnesota at the same time that he's been passing these statements. What further details can you give our viewers as far as this particular crackdown is concerned?
Yes, well, Pia, it's really important to note how much turmoil the United States is going through currently, not because of any global or other intervention, but within the nation in itself. Now, I would like to give more insight with regards to what and how the immigration pause has come about. Now, this immigration pause has not come out of the blue. In fact, it has followed a devastating instance that took place near the White House, where two people from the National Guard team were shot, and the traces of the shooter were to an Afghan local who was seeking asylum in the US. Now, when you look at it as a whole, authorities signal that further restrictions could allow and could follow as a part of a broader security overhaul. Now, the aftermath of all of this has resulted in the pause of effects of green card interviews, neutralization ceremonies, the asylum decisions that have been causing a widespread of cancellations and delays with regards to citizenship and other such processes within the United States in itself. You very rightly mentioned that this pause applies to around 19 countries, out of which a few are Iran, Sudan, Eritrea, Haiti, Somalia and Venezuela. These have been strictly mentioned under the immigration pause in itself. Now, green card delays and neutralization ceremony delays have widely been noticed. The scale is huge. Pending, there are over 1.5 million asylum applications that are pending and are yet to be processed due to this pause in itself. This is causing a lot of turmoil within the nation with regards to a lot of immigration crackdown rules. Something that we do need to take note of is that there is no clear timeline that has been mentioned with regards to how long this would go on, but we do hope that US could resolve this and reduce the level of turmoil that is happening within the citizens in itself and all those who are seeking asylum, all those who are seeking citizenship within the nation.
But it doesn't seem quite likely, because we do know the stance that the Trump administration has adopted towards immigrants. On that note, we're shifting focus towards further developments we're tracking. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition skipped a parliamentary vote regarding US President Donald Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza. The vote was proposed by opposition leader Yair Lapid. It was symbolic, as Netanyahu had already publicly endorsed the plan, which includes a ceasefire agreement with Hamas that was inked all the way back on the 10th of October. Only 39 lawmakers participated, with none voting against. Now, the non-binding vote could have embarrassed Netanyahu if coalition members who oppose aspects of the plan had voted down on it. The plan, of course, mentions Palestinian statehood, which Netanyahu himself opposes. In fact, members of the ruling coalition, remember, his Likud party as well, they'd earlier, in fact, voted against what Donald Trump was threatening. They'd voted to annex the West Bank. This has, of course, led to increased tensions. There were also tensions that had surfaced back in October during Donald Trump's speech in the Knesset, which had led to a preliminary vote, of course, calling for the annexation of the West Bank. In fact, US Vice President J.D. Vance criticized that vote, calling it an insult. Let's, in fact, listen in to a comment that was made at the Knesset.
Israel, by virtue of its sovereign authority, hereby reaffirms President Trump's 20-point plan, calls upon its neighboring states to establish regional peace with it, and expresses its gratitude to the President for his efforts.
In other crucial developments, Russian President Vladimir Putin will visit India from tomorrow, that is the 4th of December. It's a 2-day visit. He is, of course, going to be attending the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit, which is aimed at strengthening ties amid rising geopolitical tensions. This visit comes as India has faced punitive US tariffs over its oil imports from Russia, but remains committed to its strategic partnership with Moscow. The summit will focus on expanding trade with India and Russia, aiming to boost bilateral trade to $100 billion by 2030. India is also looking at covering its deficit with Russia. Discussions are also expected to include defense cooperation, including the potential purchase of Su-57 fighter jets and the S-500 missile defense system, although concerns do remain about Russia's ability to fulfill these orders. India has been balancing its ties with Russia while responding to US pressure to reduce Russian oil imports. Despite this, it continues to prioritize its own energy security. It has also increased energy imports from the United States, and this visit is being seen as a reaffirmation of India's independent foreign policy, its desire to deepen cooperation with Russia in the face of shifting global alliances. What's also on the cards is, in fact, talks regarding the civil nuclear sector. The chief of Rosatom will be visiting India as well. If you all remember, last year when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had gone to Russia, he visited the Rosatom headquarters. India and Russia do collaborate as far as the civil nuclear sector is concerned. We all know of the Kundankulam nuclear plant in Tamil Nadu. With us on the broadcast is my colleague Marisha Barve. Marisha, high-octane developments slated to take place in India's national capital, New Delhi, tomorrow with the arrival of Russian President Vladimir Putin. What all is on the agenda?
Well, yes, Pia, absolutely. Putin's visit to India would be the 23rd summit, India-Russia annual summit, where President Putin will be meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, a lot of talks have gone with regards to strengthening bilateral ties, strengthening partnership, and like you very rightly mentioned, defense and energy are on the key talks. But apart from that, interestingly, very interestingly, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov held a virtual conference yesterday ahead of Putin's visit to India, where he highlighted a few key points that would be discussed in this annual summit with Russia and India. A few areas that were touched upon in his briefing were that multiple agreements are expected to be signed within Russia and India with regards to trade and economy, healthcare, academics, culture and media, and key areas of bilateral ties. which obviously does transcend into economic engagement, where one of the key focuses is to expand economic engagement between the two nations. A lot of defense and energy talks will be happening, especially with regards to military cooperation with Russia. Now, the S-400 missile defense systems and the Su-57 fighter program are high on the agenda with regards to this summit. Now, defense collaboration, like you previously mentioned, and a lot of military cooperation between the two nations. Now, as mentioned, trade volumes are expected to increase. A lot of oil and energy agreements will be signed, according to the virtual conference that Peskov did mention.
Absolutely. As the trade volume currently, Marisha, you rightly pointed out, the target is $100 billion. The current volume stands at $68 billion US. What's also interesting is that we're expecting an India-Russia Business Leaders Forum to also take place tomorrow, where both leaders will be participating. I'd like to thank you, Marisha, for taking our time, of course, sharing all those details with our viewers. On that note, we're shifting focus to further updates coming in. We're now learning that French President Emmanuel Macron has arrived in Beijing for a 3-day state visit focused on boosting trade ties and urging China to help pressurize Russia towards a ceasefire in Ukraine. Macron, who was in fact welcomed by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, began his trip with a visit to the renovated Changlong Garden in the Forbidden City. What exactly does France hope to secure? Well, more Chinese investments, of course. Trade is one key aspect, better market access for French exports, with new agreements expected in the energy sector, food sector, and aviation sector as well. Now, China accounts for 46% of France's global trade deficit, and economic tensions have grown, especially amidst the recent EU-China trade tiff. A key goal of this visit, apart from the trade sector, is Ukraine, of course, the war that is taking place between Russia and Ukraine. Incidentally, just before his trip to Beijing, Emmanuel Macron had earlier met Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Macron now aims to convince Beijing to use its influence to push Moscow towards peace negotiations as well. France also expects China not to provide Russia with support that could prolong the war. China, of course, we do know there have reports come out that even though it does not directly supply weapons to Russia, it does supply dual-use items, including fiber optic cables, lithium-ion batteries that are then used to manufacture drones, which are used to strike deeper into Ukrainian territory. China maintains it supports dialogue and a political resolution to the war. Macron is expected to meet the Chinese President Xi Jinping and attend a business forum before talks with top Chinese officials. On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus towards news coming in from Hong Kong. The death toll in a fire that ripped through 7 high-rise towers in Hong Kong last week has now risen to 159. There are reports coming in that 31 people are still missing. Officials have informed that a total of 140 of the deceased have been identified. 91 of them are women, 49 are men. The youngest person to have lost their lives was just a 1-year-old baby. The oldest was 97. Now, authorities have stated that 6 more arrests have been made in the case, adding to the 13 who were already arrested yesterday. Reports are suggesting that a search for bodies inside all 7 of the 8 high-rise residential towers ravaged in the fire is now complete. Meanwhile, mourners in Hong Kong have gathered near the devastated Wong Fuk Court towers to grieve the loss of life in the city's deadliest fires in decades. Listen in to what they had to say.
这么多人没有了家，接受不了。比如说我在想象，如果是我的家庭没有了老公，没有了女儿，我不知道我怎么还能不能活下去。我就觉得现在最主要的就是，平复一下大家的心情，失去了亲人，失去了家，什么都没有了，一个人孤零零的活在这个世上，没有了盼头怎么办？不是说要捐多少钱给他们，主要的我觉得是心里的这个创伤很难平复的，这是最主要的。
希望佢去咗人安息啦，在生嘅人嚟計，望佢哋勇敢啲咯，面對咯。 終歸嚟計，我俾啲祝福仲係在生嗰啲人咯。至於死咗嘅人嘅一路好走咯。終歸講嚟講去4個字，就係慘。
On that note, viewers, we're shifting focus to some more tragic developments, this time from Southeast Asia and South Asia. Severe flooding and landslides have killed over 1,400 people in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Thailand and Malaysia. Indonesia has been the worst hit with at least 753 deaths, followed by Sri Lanka. The death toll is at 465. Thailand and Malaysia have reported 185 and 3 deaths, respectively. Rescue efforts are of course still underway with all these countries grappling. There are over 1,000 people who are still missing and many areas have been cut off due to mudslides and infrastructure damage as well. In Indonesia in particular, more than 1.5 million people have been displaced and over 2,600 have been injured. The Indonesian government has mobilized military resources as well. It's deployed hospital ships to the affected provinces. That's not all. Sri Lanka, which is of course facing its own economic crisis, it's recovering from the economic crisis that had ravaged the country just a few years back, is facing additional challenges, including limited resources for disaster response. The country is of course seeking international aid, and neighboring nations like India and the UAE have launched relief efforts as well. The economic impact includes damage to agricultural sector. It's expected to strain Sri Lanka's fragile economy. Meanwhile, updates also coming from Thailand as far as the recovery efforts are concerned. We're learning that in Thailand, recovery is progressing at a steady pace. In fact, it's hastened up. Compensation has been provided to over 120 households. The floods have, of course, highlighted stark economic disparities, with wealthier nations better equipped to handle this crisis. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka is struggling to manage the devastation. On that note, viewers, due to paucity of time, it's a wrap on the newsroom. We will continue to track all of these developments very, very closely, but we dip